Hey there, Heather, ho there. It's Jeff Cutter Diamond welcoming you to yet another Cutter Top 10 sports video. And we're going to be doing another NFL video. We're going to do the NFL as I'm wearing the Patriot shirt. I'm going to be doing the top 10 regular season finales of all time. There's some great finishes, but we're going to do the regular season finales of all time. I actually found some good ones. But anyway, that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be doing the top 10 regular season finishes, and of course everything the last week of the season. Not every season had like the same amount of weeks and all that, but there's some great regular season finishes. First off, number 10 is the Packers Bears 2013 final week. The Bears and the Packers have had some crazy games. In the 2010-11 NFC title game at Soldier Field, the Packers won thanks to a BJ Raji pick six. And then 2 years later in 2013, the 2013 season, it was winner take all for the NFC North. Packers Bears at Soldier Field. Aaron Rodgers made a surprise comeback from injury, and he actually produced a good game. In the fourth quarter, with a few minutes left, he threw a big pass to Randall Cobb, who scored into the end zone touchdown, and the Packers beat the Bears 33-28. Rivalry game, division game, late comeback, iconic throw, everything won in the finale. And that was pretty impressive, all that. Number 9, the Chargers beating the Broncos in 2008, cementing a big choke. The Denver Broncos weren't the only team to make a massive choke in the 2008-09 season, but this was just as bad. Anyhow, the Broncos were looking good. They were up by 4 games with 4 to play in the AFC West. All they needed to do was win or have a Chargers loss. Strange as it sounds, the Broncos stumbled for 3 weeks, and the Chargers won for 3 straight weeks. Chargers Broncos, this was the finale in week 17 in 2008. It was one of the most craziest weeks around. There is actually a video on the 2008 final week, I think, or some other week in like 2007 or 2009. I can't remember. But yeah, this was crazy because the Chargers beat the Broncos and obviously won tiebreak. They won the AFC West. The Broncos also choked the 2009 AFC West. So, the division just wasn't theirs. So that was just brutal. And all that. And of course, to also note, within 2008, there was another choke. The Cowboys choking the NFC East away in December to the Eagles, losing in the final week 48-6 or something. Something ridiculous, 43-6. But yeah, and Dallas at the time always had great records, but in December they always faltered. Tony Romo would falter. Anyway, number 8 is the Giants Cowboys ending the 1993 season. There's actually an NFL throwback video on YouTube about the most craziest final week in history was 1993 because there were many seedings and division things on the line. Excuse me. And this was the biggest of the 93 final week. It was the Giants versus the Cowboys. Both teams came into the game 12-3. I think 12-3, right? Something like that. The Giants Cowboys game at Giants Stadium was a lot of things on the line. Whoever won not only won the division, but got the 1 seed in the NFC, meaning that the road to the NFC playoffs, if everything works out, goes through that stadium. So the Giants could have been the number 1 seed in the 93-94 season, or the Cowboys. And this was also special, kind of bittersweet, because this was the last NFC regular season game CBS would broadcast. And then, of course, Fox got the NFC regular season stuff for the 94 season. CBS would get the AFC in 1998 once NBC got rid of their Sunday afternoon schedule. But anyway, Giants Cowboys. But this was even bigger. The Giants had LT. They had Phil Simms, who were both going to retire at the end of the season, if you will. Well, forced to because of some player action. But Emmitt Smith ran for over 130 yards. The worst part was that he actually injured himself on the Giant Stadium rock hard turf. Somehow, in some way, even though his shoulder was messed up, he still carried the ball, and he did well. Eddie Murray, not the Baltimore first baseman, but the native of Halifax, Nova Scotia, the kicker, who was white, unfortunately, kicked the winning field goal, and the Cowboys beat the Giants and got the 1 seed. And they used the 1 seed to win the Super Bowl against the Buffalo Bills, giving the Bills their fourth straight Super Bowl loss. The Giants had to go into San Francisco, even though they had a better record than the Niners, I think. But because of the seeding, they had to go to San Francisco and got walloped 44-3 when Ricky Watters put up 5 touchdowns and basically retired Sims and Taylor. Number 7 is the Browns, and for that matter, the Lions' terrible final weeks. So in 2008, the Detroit Lions went into Week 17 in Green Bay at Lambeau Field, needing to win to avoid the record of losing 16 consecutive games in the regular season. 15 was the record set by the 2001 Carolina Panthers, who actually won the first game of the season but lost the next 15. The Browns were trying their best not to be 0-16. In essence, I think this, well, everyone remembers the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 76 were 0-14, but they played 14 games instead of 16. Would the 76 Bucks win one of the 2 extra games? I don't think so. But still, the Lions didn't want to be the first team at 0-16. They went into Lambeau. You could probably guess trouble Lambeau Field. They just couldn't win in Lambeau, and they were the first 0-16 team. The Browns were trying to avoid the same fate in 2017 in Pittsburgh. They almost beat the Steelers, but they lost 28-24. So yeah, ineptness times 2. Number 6 is the double Ravens choke of 2022 and 2025 regular seasons. So the Ravens had 2 massive chokes in the regular season in Pittsburgh on the final week. The 2022 season, they had a chance to kibosh the Steelers and get the division. Unfortunately, the Ravens made some big mistakes, and the Steelers scored late to win that game. And of course, this past season, 2025, the Ravens had a chance to kick a field goal, win the game, and go to the playoffs. But then the 40-plus yarder went wide right. It was a bad sinking feeling for the Ravens in their kick game. But they're going to redeem themselves, I hope. Lamar Jackson better produce. Number 5 is the Bills over the Dolphins. In essence, the Bengals beating the Ravens in the 2017 last week. The Buffalo Bills took care of the Dolphins 22-16, but they needed some help. Buffalo had been the only team in the NFL at the 2017 season to not make the playoffs in both the 21st century and the new millennium. The last time the Bills made the playoffs before the 2017 season was the 99 season, in which they played the first playoff game after Y2K. And that was the Music City Miracle against the Titans, in which Christie kicked it short, but then the Titans used a lateral that seemed to go forward, which would have been illegal. And the Bills got bit. It looked like the Bills basically had the curse of the Bambino, if you will. The Bills just couldn't make the playoffs. They got Drew Bledsoe, they got some people, but Josh Allen and the new core worked out. They beat the Dolphins. But they needed the Bengals to shock the Ravens, and they did. Andy Dalton threw a late touchdown, I think to A.J. Brown. I can't remember who the wide receiver was. The Bengals, with 2 minutes left, beat the Ravens, and Buffalo got in on the last-ditch attempt. I think Buffalo beat Jacksonville that year. Did I not? I think, right? Yeah, Buffalo beat Jacksonville. I said, there's no way Jacksonville's going to beat Buffalo, even if they're home. And, me being a Patriot fan, hating the Bills and all that, and laughing at Bills fans saying, you never make the playoffs. We've won 6 Super Bowls during that time. Ha ha. But nevertheless, the Bills have bit us like 2 or 3 times. But yeah, that was crazy. Even more crazy is that Buffalo Bill fans actually gave Andy Dalton's charity, $1 to $2 million. And they sent gift baskets to Andy Dalton and his charity. So, Andy Dalton was just shocked how Buffalo fans gave the charity for knocking out the Ravens. Speaking of charities and all that, but gift baskets. Number 4 is the Vikings Cardinals 2003. So the 2003 season was down to the final week. The Vikings were at one time 6-0, and primed to make the playoffs, but somehow in some way they faltered. Some say they were tired from their practices being a little too heavy-handed, and the Vikings were slumping. But they could just beat the Cardinals on the final day in Arizona at Sun Devil Stadium and just get in. So they had to win. They had to win. Otherwise, the Packers, should they beat the Broncos on Lambeau Field turf, happened. I know that the game was the game on CBS or something? Well, Channel 6 in Canada on Global, when Global had the NFL coverage, they had the Packers Broncos game on the TV and all that. And then they would do the check ins of Vikings Cardinals. So the Vikings just need to beat the Cardinals. And the Vikings had like a 12-point lead with like 4 minutes left. All they needed to do was hang on. Cardinals scored a touchdown, and then they got the onside kick. And then Josh McCown on fourth and forever threw the ball towards the end zone, and somehow, in some freaking way, Nathan Poole made the catch of all people. It was Nathan Poole. You could just hear Paul Allen of the Vikings radio guy say, "No, no, touchdown, no! I think it was Nate Poole." But yeah, Nate Poole made the catch. Now, he was kind of out of bounds, but the NFL at the time had the rule that because he would have been in bounds if it wasn't for the Vikings defender pushing him out, he was doomed to be in bounds, touchdown. And Lambeau Field went bonkers because the Cardinals of all teams took out the Vikings. The Packers beat the Broncos easily to get the NFC North spot. And that was the game that sent them against the Falcons in the wild card. But unfortunately, the Falcons beat the tar out of the Packers. But it didn't matter. I mean, Green Bay gave Nathan Poole the key to the city and gave him VIP access to the home playoff game. He actually was in the press box, but then Nathan Poole decided to head to the seats with the diehards. That's what you do. And Nathan Poole will always be that name. Number 3 is the Seahawks Rams 2010. This was a key game for the two teams. They were playing on Sunday Night Football, and the winner got to be the NFC West champions. Sure, they would have a bad record, but at least they win the division and get a home playoff game for the wild card when it was just 6 teams in each league. The Rams were coming into the game at 7-8. The Seahawks were 6-9. The Rams needed to win to avoid the distinction of being 7-9 and winning and hosting a playoff game. But the Seahawks beat the Rams. The Rams choked their chances of winning the NFC West at 6. And by tiebreak, the Seahawks beat the Rams. I think they beat them both times, which is a tiebreak, and they went 7-9. So the Seahawks at 7-9, 2 games below 500, managed to win the division. The Rams, Niners, and Cardinals all sucked. Well, it's the Cardinals, what do you expect? This was 2010. But what's even more crazy was that the Seahawks' home playoff game was against the Saints, the defending Super Bowl champs, and they won thanks to Beastquake. Remember Beastquake? That was the game. The Seahawks won that game, got to host the Saints, even though their records were shit. But Beastquake beat the Saints. They lost the next game, but who the fuck cares? I remember 4 years later, I think the Panthers were 7-9 in hosting a playoff game. And I was discussing with Jason Lundgren, my Seahawks fan friend, and I said, Jason, I said, a certain team did go 7-9 and win their NFC divisional match because he didn't trust the Panthers. And he's like, yeah, you're right. And lo and behold, I was right. The Panthers won that game. Number 2, Dolphins Jets 2008. This was a critical game because earlier in the day, the Patriots beat the shit out of the Bills. Well, of course, I'm a Patriots fan, so yippee in Buffalo. But what happens is the Dolphins-Jets game meant everything for the AFC Championship. And the Patriots were in the driver's seat to probably get into the playoffs. What's even crazy about 2008 is you got to remember, this was the year Brady went down with that knee injury in the first game of the season after that low hit from, I can't remember that Kansas City Chiefs player. I mean, Matt Castle got the Patriots to 11-5. That is like fucking amazing. But yeah, the Dolphins took on the Jets, If the Jets had beaten the Dolphins, that would actually give the Jets the AFC East, and the Pats would get the wild card. I mean, who cares? The Pats made the playoffs without Tom Brady, with an injured Tom Brady, in essence. If the Dolphins won, the Pats would lose on tiebreak to, I think, Denver for a wild card spot. Regardless, the Dolphins took on the Jets, and Chad freaking Pennington, who was the Jets quarterback the previous year before they decided to dump him off because Brett Favre was coming out of retirement. So Favre went to the Jets, and Chad Pennington was picked up by the Dolphins. Miami needed a quarterback after losing the chance to get Drew Brees a couple years earlier. They went 1-15 in 2007. They had to win. Their only win was in overtime against the Ravens. I mean, Miami went from 1-15 to AFC East champions at 11-5. That is one of the biggest comebacks in NFL history. 10 games. Chad Pennington sucked it to the Jets, and Brett Favre was not playing his best. Favre was playing with an injury, which is stupid. He should have come out of the game because then maybe the Jets win. If the Jets lose without him, it's not his fault, but it was his fucking fault. And I think Jets fans probably had the pitchforks for him, and he left for Minnesota. But yeah, the Pats were out of the playoffs, 11-5, tied with the 1985 Broncos for the most wins by a team not making the playoffs, 11. Because the 85 Broncos went 11-5, missed the playoffs in the 85 season, and the Browns, who won the AFC Central at 8-8, got in. But yeah, that was just amazing. I think Miami lost their first game, but who cares? And that's why I say fuck you, Brett Favre. And number one is one of the most ultimate games of all time. The Raiders-Chargers 2021. Week 18, when it was the first year of the 17-game regular season. This was game 272. This was on Sunday Night Football, Raiders-Chargers. Both teams had playoff stakes on the line. And there was actually a possibility of a tie that could send both teams to the postseason in overtime. So they had to go to overtime, and they were thinking with a tie. So anyway, the Chargers were playing for the tie. Yeah, I think it was the Chargers who were playing for the tie. Or was it the Raiders who played for the tie? I think it was the Raiders who were playing for the tie, if memory serves. Yeah, the Raiders were playing for the tie. Because they were running the ball just hoping for a tie, and both teams would get in. But then the Raiders fumbled the ball, and the Chargers got the ball and scored a last-minute field goal, I think. My research says that. Yeah, my research says Raiders were playing for overtime. They were basically playing out the card for overtime because they knew that both teams could have gotten in on a tie. So yeah, yeah. Yeah, I was like, that was kind of awkward. All that. So anyway, yeah, my stats, and I'm like, what the heck? Yeah, something didn't seem right. No, the Chargers were playing for overtime, and unfortunately, though, the Raiders got the ball back and won in overtime, which actually screwed the Chargers over. So yeah, I keep thinking it was the Raiders who was playing for overtime and the Chargers won that game. But, you had to recheck. But yeah, that was crazy and all that. And we almost saw a set tie. I wonder what Goodell would have done if both teams had played for the tie. Well, whatever. That's the end of the regular season. I'm Jeff Diamond. Adieu.